right, good evening, welcome everybody. I just wanted to welcome everybody on behalf of the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at the Graduate Center. We co-organized this event with Judith Anderson. We're very grateful for this collaboration and to have everybody here in New York. This is our first hybrid event, so you guys are, yes, it's kind of an experiment. Thanks for being here in person. We'll be live streaming on both Facebook and YouTube, and we'll have English interpretation in our live stream. I'd like to introduce Judith Anderson. She is a cultural anthropologist and Afro-Latin Americanist whose research on Black political mobilization and who does research on Black political mobilization in present-day Buenos Aires, Argentina. She has taught and conducted scholarly research in areas including African diaspora in the Americas, Latin American studies, and race and identity in Argentina. Before joining the faculty at BMCC, Professor Anderson taught at Hunter College, CUNY, York College, and the College of New Rochelle. She is widely published with articles focusing on the politics of Black identity in Buenos Aires. So welcome everybody, and thank you to this panel, Legislating Intersectional Violence in Argentina, a panel discussion with Argentinian Black legal scholars. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, and thank you to the Graduate Center, to CLACLS, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at the Graduate Center for hosting us, right? Amazing. We're so glad you're all joining us tonight, and we have the pleasure of having live and in person the members of OAFRO, Argentina's first Black legal aid organization. Yes, hello, this is amazing, right? So we want this to be kind of an informal conversation. We're so grateful to all of you who made it out here in person. I'm gonna let each one of them introduce themselves and to say what other organizations they are affiliated with, because they are not only legal scholars, but they are all activists and do a lot of amazing work for Africans and Afro-descendants in Argentina. And we're gonna try to remember to speak slowly. We have Walker, our amazing translator, we're so grateful to have him here as well, working with us. First, go ahead, Madoda. We'll just go down the line, yes.
Hello everybody. Thank you very much for your presence. We really appreciate it a lot. Well, my name is Madoda Ntaka. I'm Argentine and South African as well, since my father was South African. And I'm 47 years old. I'm a lawyer. I passionately dedicate myself to somehow assist our community, the Black community in Argentina. In my case, and also in the case of my colleagues, rendering legal aid to our community, those who were disenfranchised from society, those who were cast aside for so many years, for so many centuries, because we are living a legacy of discrimination and that started in the colonial era. So we are here somehow, as Judy mentioned, as an organization that will try to assist fully to our community by providing legal aid. When we say, well, I will pass on the mic for the rest of my colleagues, and then we exchange the questions and answers.
So excuse me, I'm going to speak in Spanish. My English is not perfect. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for coming and attending. So for us, this visit is very important, and exchange the work that we're doing so that you can familiarize yourself in what we're doing in Argentina and its communities. My name is Patricia Gomes. I'm Argentine. Descendants of immigrants of the West African country of Cape Verde at the beginning of the 20th century. I'm a lawyer and instructor at the University of Buenos Aires, activist, anti-racist, Afro-feminist. I'm part of these organizations. One of them is Pro-Afro, and I'm advisor of the Secretariat of Women of Genders and Diversity. Thank you very much.
Bueno, buenas noches. También voy a hablar en español.
I'm going to speak in Spanish as well.
Alí Delgado.
I'm Alí Delgado.
35 años.
I'm 35.
Bueno, quería agradecer mucho
I want to thank you
esta oportunidad
very much for this opportunity
espacio que es mi
and in this beautiful space.
soy abogado.
I'm a lawyer.
Soy docente de
I also teach,
Facultad de Derecho. Tenemos
and I'm on the faculty of the law school
Patricia enseñando
of the University of Buenos Aires.
en la Universidad de Buenos Aires.
We teach racism at the University of Buenos Aires.
Racista, militante político.
I'm anti-racist. I'm also a partisan militant.
Parte de la agrupación Shango,
I'm part of this organization that's called Chango, that's also Afro-related,
compañeras,
where I work with comrades,
y trabajo en la justicia de
and I work with the justice
Buenos Aires.
in Buenos Aires.
Muy buenas noches. También me voy a expresar en
I'm
idioma
also going to
español.
speak in Spanish.
Mi nombre es Ntaka Sene, me llaman Moustafa.
My name is Natasha Moustafa. I was born in Senegal.
Viajé a la Argentina en los años 2007.
I came to Argentina in 2007,
2 años que vivo a la
or 14 years.
Soy
I've been in
migrante.
Argentina 14 years. I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant to Argentina,
Como muchos otros senegaleses también soy migrante en la Argentina.
like many other Afro-descendants that are Argentine.
Asociación de residentes senegaleses en Argentina.
So we've created the Association of Afro-Descendants in Argentina.
Así que hoy en
I'm-
día nos presentamos acá en representación
So we're presenting ourselves here as part of the Afro-Argentine community.
compañeros que
Together with my comrades,
sabemos que tenemos una ardua tarea
we have an arduous task
tratar de defender o de
to defend
orientar a esta comunidad
and
que es una
accompany and orient this community of Afro-descendants in Argentina
la migración africana.
and help the African migration to Argentina. In part,
Estudiante
I'm a student,
de Derecho en la Universidad de
a law student at the University of Buenos Aires.
También profesionalmente trabajo
I am professionally,
Nacional de Migraciones,
I'm at the
Comisión Nacional para
National
siempre estoy
Commission of Immigration, so I'm always working with migrants and in contact with them. Thank you.
Hola, buenas noches a todos.
Hi,
Yo también me voy a
I'm going to speak also in Spanish.
Mi nombre es Mailen Lamadrid. Yo tengo
I'm Mailen Lamadrid, I'm 28,
soy sexta generación de afro-argentinos.
and I'm part of the Afro-descendant Argentina.
Ciudad de Buenos Aires,
I'm a student at the University of Buenos Aires. And
agrupación Shango, además,
I'm also a member of the Shango organization.
afro para la asistencia legal en Argentina.
I'm also a founder of an organization that helps people
Thank you
as
all. And
legal
I
aid
just
to
want to point out
Afro-descendants.
that you really have a good representation of the African diaspora as it appears in Argentina. And I know we have people here in person that don't speak Spanish, so I'm kind of doing a little summary as well. Madoda, his father was South African, but his mother is Argentine from Italian descent. Right? Patricia, she's descended from Cape Verdean immigrants from the who came in the early 1900s. Ali as well is descended from that population in that diaspora. Moustafa, he's from some of the most recent members of the diaspora, West African immigrants who came in very large numbers in the 1990s, around the mid-90s, right, to the early 2000s. So he represents that population. And Mailen, she is descended from Afro-Argentines who go all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade. So her family has a very, very long history in Argentina. So we're so fortunate to have really the diversity that is represented there, right here on this stage with us. So thank you all for coming. Let's start with some questions. Madoda, can you tell us a little bit about OAFRO, what the organization does, why it was created?
Yes, definitely. OAFRO was conceived to assist legally to the black community in Argentina.
And sorry, we should also mention, what does OAFRO stand
Yes.
for? Organización.
Yes.
We should translate it.
OAFRO is the organization that provides assistance to the Afro-Argentine, African, and Afro-descendant community. As Judy mentioned, is the first black organization in Argentina that is focused in providing legal aid to the community. When we say legal aid, we also mentioned or refer to legal orientation, legal advice, because many consultants, they might only need some kind of advice to solve the problem and might not need sort of legal representation before courts, you know? But we also do, we take the cases to court. So we have a license to plunge the case in court if it's necessary. And in many cases, we come from different backgrounds and we have a common platform in which we somehow suffer discrimination in different ways. We have different environments of where we experience that discrimination, but we have this in common. We said that, we are students, we are lawyers, and we decide that it's the time to try and give this service to the community, which we've been lagged behind in society. We have sort of this idea that we were always pushed to the margins as a black community, and we believe that by providing access to justice, access to the court system, will be in how provide a reparation for all those years that we were invisible or non-existent in our society.
Thank you so much, Madoda. And I would just add that the organization was just created during the pandemic in July of 2020, correct? We were formally created. The idea came about in 2018, though, so this is all very new. So you all are on the cusp of something really exciting here in terms of activism and legal aid. Patricia? What? Yes, of course.
Our assistance is useful and needed because we have some institutions in Argentina that monitor discrimination, but they're not trained to handle it and track it. And there are cases that they don't consider discrimination, toward discrimination.
You're trying to show that racism is part of your legal claim, it's nearly impossible in Argentina, especially as a person of African descent, if you consider yourself a black person or an Afro-descendant, right? Absolutely. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Mailen. Speaking of which, Patricia, can you tell us, in 2 minutes, can you give us the history of black people in Argentina? Welcome to teaching, Patricia. I give 400 years in like 3 months, okay? Yes, but can you talk a little bit about invisibility of Afro-descendants and why it's so important that we have organizations like OAFRO?
I'll try to summarize. The history is very complex in every part of the world. And Argentina is not an exception. Many people that don't know us ask, Afro-descendants in Argentina? In this country, that always has been constructed as a target, as in the white image, not only domestically, but to a foreign audience. But the reality is that Argentina has had an Afro-descendant experience over all its history. First, it started with the transatlantic slave trade. So Afro-descendants have been 5 centuries. Then the next wave in the 20th century, especially from Cape Verde, So Alicia and I are from descendants from Cape Verde, and the new African generation, Afro-Latin American, Afro-Caribbean of the last 30 years, the Afro-Argentine community is very diverse. What happened that people still keep thinking that Argentina is a white and European country? The thing is that there were policies of the government of the whitening of the population, Argentine, to construct an identity linked to the origins of Europeans. Because racism, scientific, of the 19th century, that stated that white Europeans were synonymous of progress and development. And this is what the founders of Argentina wanted, to construct a new country. Those policies of whitening necessitated a type of rhetoric that would make invisible the Afro-descendants in Argentina, and for that, the Argentine state advocated policies to erase the negritude in almost every sphere. One of those policies were the statistics. The Afro-descendant communities were erased from the statistics, from the official measurements and documents. And that was one form to show that the population, Afro-Argentine, was disappearing. And it was very effective, because if we look at the census figures from the 18th century through to the 20th century, we'll see from 50% of the population Afro-descendant in Argentina, we went down to 1%, and that's a lie. And it's a lie that we died in wars, that we died as a result of plagues. So one way of the whitening, those were factors, but a big factor was the statistics. In 1978, recently, in 2010, 11 years ago, we returned to be incorporated in census statistics. And so what that means in the past is that there was a lack of information of the Afro-descendants in Argentina. We don't know exactly how many we are, in what conditions our community is, because we've been erased from history and erased from statistics. And for that reason, it is very difficult today to construct an identity that recognizes the Afro-Argentines as well. And that's part of our work, apart from judicial counseling. One of our functions is the education, is the dissemination of information in Argentina and the world, which we're doing here, that the Afro-Argentines exist, and we've always existed. And we've been fundamental in the construction of our country, of the country like Argentina, which still that is white and European.
Thank you, Patricia. Excellent. Yes, well done. Absolutely. Thank you so much for mentioning whitening, which those of you who have taken Latin American Studies classes, at least with BMCC Center for Ethnic Studies, know we talk about whitening, right? And Argentina, I think, by far the most successful nation in all of the region in terms of spreading this whitening ideology, to the point where today most Argentines you meet will say, you know, no, we don't have any black people, we don't have any Afro-descendants, we have Argentines here who can agree with me, yes. Yeah, the president, absolutely, Marcelo, thank you, absolutely, that this is the... Yes, they don't look for black people, Mailen said. Absolutely. So thank you so much. And the census, the role of the census in that erasure of an entire population of people. Imagine, you move outside of Buenos Aires, over half of the state's population was Afro-descendant. How do you go from that to zero? Almost overnight, right? It's quite incredible, the history. Right, thank you so much. Speaking of, you mentioned some laws, Ali. Can you tell us about what laws and policies then do we have now to fight this erasure and to actually recognize, you know, try to kind of revisibilize, let's say, these Africans and Afro-descendants in Argentina?
Bueno, como Argentina fue tan, como decía recién Judith, exitosa en
As we just said here,
eliminar al menos discursivamente a la población afrodescendiente,
according to the margin, the Afro-descendant population, there are very few legal measures that protect us. In fact, there's only one national law,
la
1562, that institutes the Day of Afro-Argentines. It only has 6 sections, so that so we're trying to broaden that, but it's an achievement nevertheless. That law. The Day of the Afro-descendant has to do with the death of an activist from Afro-descendant. Then there were some advances in anti-discrimination subjects. There's a very brief law, the Law 23.592 against discriminatory acts from 1988. It is about Afro-descendants and others condemning discrimination. The most advanced one is from Buenos Aires. It develops more the standards developed at the international level against discrimination. For example, definitions of racism, systemic racism, and similar. And there's some laws at the provincial level that, for example, set aside a day for the Afro-Argentine descendant culture. In the city of Buenos Aires, there's another law whose author is right next to me. And there's small laws which value, to some extent, the existence of the Afro-Argentines and being Afro-Argentine. And what I can mention as an achievement to come is an Afro-Argentine plan at the national level, but it hasn't been achieved yet. It has to do with public policies. It's in construction, so to say. And the idea is to orient public policies so that they're aware of the racial dimension. So we'll keep you posted on any developments and news on that front. And so that's what we have today, more or less, on the legal front.
Thank you so much, Ali.
For
And thank you for
Afro-Argentines.
highlighting that our colleague here, Patricia, has been instrumental in helping draft some of this anti-racism legislation, right, through formally. So they're actually helping write these laws to protect the rights of Africans and Afro-descendants in Argentina. We see that race really wasn't legislated. Now, this is not unique to Argentina, but you don't really see a lot of laws legislating race anywhere in Latin America. So then imagine you go to Argentina, it's even harder to legislate anti-racism. If we didn't recognize racism in the first place. So that's a huge challenge that all of the individuals up here are directly involved in that process of trying to codify anti-racism into the law. So that's some really amazing work. Now, when you all go to Argentina, which you will be going if you haven't gone yet, always let everyone know who meets us. Even those of you out there virtually, yes, we now have 5 wonderful friends in Argentina. So when you go, especially because most of us land in Buenos Aires, the most visible population of Black people that we see, of course, are the African immigrants. Oftentimes, people will see Senegalese vendors on the street and other African street vendors. So this is definitely the most visible population, and they're also often targeted as well. Moustafa has worked very closely with that population. Can you tell us, Moustafa, a little bit about the African immigration, these different populations of Africans that have immigrated into Argentina and some of their challenges?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Como ustedes sabrán,
As you know,
la migración
the migration,
africana en general y en
African
la migración senegalesa en la Argentina
in general in Argentina,
comenzó en los últimos años,
started
en el año 1990,
in the 90s.
que tanto senegaleses como cameruneses,
People came from Senegal,
de Costa de Marfil,
Mali,
poco de Benín,
Cape Verde,
Sierra Leone,
Benin,
Guinea,
Ivory Coast,
Sudán,
Guinea,
por supuesto,
South
Nigeria,
Africa,
Angola,
Angola, Nigeria.
llegar a la Argentina.
We started coming to Argentina.
Y los senegaleses en este
The
país
Senegalese,
hoy en
particularly,
día podemos decir que superan 4.000 o 5.000 senegaleses ahí en la Argentina.
there are 4,000 or 5,000 Senegalese in Argentina.
Que siempre digo que
That population that I always say
empieza con sus dificultades
start with difficulties
de partida,
from the start,
porque todos sabemos
because
que
all
los
of
países
us know
desarrollados,
in a
particular
developing
los
country like
africanos,
the African,
dificultades para
have a lot of
poder
difficulties.
salir, digamos, los ciudadanos, para poder salir
You have a lot of difficulties to leave their countries
hacia los países de destino. Y
to
esto
their
es lo que
countries of
genera
destination, and this is what generates
las migraciones clandestinas.
that's what generates the clandestine migration, and that does not
De forma rápida,
that hinders their rapid integration when they arrive in their country of destination, and there's also government policies
hacer lo que se llama un seguimiento o estadísticas
or that also complicates the mission of actually tallying the extent of migrants into countries. In the case of the Senegalese, and in particular Africans in general, apart from the difficulties in Argentina, we can say play an important role in making visible the African presence in Argentina. It's not only being visible in skin color in the street, but we also talk about visibility in other spheres. It's not only being visible in the street, but the African community with the skin color in the street is a demonstration, at least puts light to the consideration that there's no Africans or no blacks in Argentina. So those African people in Argentina, because actually people who had African descent but weren't actually really black weren't considered black. So the migration brought with it a new freshness to the eyes of the Argentines, that visibility, but also so that new generations of African migrants are now in public schools. The son of immigrants. So they join the educational system from the elementary school. So they're going through the education system to the university, and also in our research, there was very little research of the black community. Some looked into slavery, but they looked at the migration from Cape Verde, but they didn't really look at Africans as a group. So the latest migrations that are in the 90s prompted researchers. It looked at it more in depth and broader the African community. So, for example, a lot of theses got written about and research were done related to the culture and population of the Africans. Our contributions regarding the Africans has a lot to do with brought a new freshness and impulse to the culture. Many Argentines are interested in African dance or learn about persecution of Africans, actually learn about some new linguistic contributions that now have been incorporated into Spanish and Argentina. So all that is very meaningful because now it helps form a society where people are thinking of the rights of the African community and recognizing the existence of them in Argentina. And at the same time, we're also living the Africans. We're undergoing very many problems in the labor situation, in incorporating us into society. There's also institutional violence. Everyone knows that beyond the recognition of Argentine of migration as a human rights, all the Africans who come in have difficulties, a lot of difficulties in getting into the immigration procedures and in on the books jobs, because right now they're very exposed because they're on the street and off the books jobs. And this is what we're trying to help fight from the African community to defend ourselves and those our people
Thank you so much,
from
Moustafa.
situations of
I think it's
vulnerability
really
they find
interesting,
themselves
the
in.
point that you made that it's how African immigrants really help bring attention to Afro-descendants in Argentina as well. That's really fascinating, how that kind of caught the attention of researchers, especially young students and graduate students who were interested in learning more about these areas. But also thinking, if you ask, most Argentines are very well aware that kind of the pillars of Argentine culture have African roots, right? Where they very much acknowledge that, but there's this disconnect that there's a possibility you could still have Afro-descendants, you could still have Afro-Argentines, that this is not just a population that exists in the past, but it's also very much a part of Argentina's present. So thank you for highlighting that. Mailen, speaking of some of the challenges that are facing Black people in Argentina, we know, as Black women in particular, there are intersectional challenges, right, that come with gender identity, that come with race, that come with all of these things. Can you speak on some of the specific challenges that African and Afro-descendant women face in Argentina currently?
Of course. Bueno, para empezar a hablar de género, me gustaría
to start speaking about gender, I'd like to go to July 25, which is the day of Afro-Argentine women and Afro-Caribbean women.
Estoy hablando muy rápido. El 25 de julio de 1992,
On July 25, 1992, 32 countries in Latin America and Caribbean got to the Dominican Republic to organize policies of resistance and develop policies to fight racism and gender discrimination. So what was developed was a network of Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Latin American women. They did a political instrument for reflection among Afro-descendants. I would like to also underscore that the organizations that we have in Argentina
está liderada por mujeres.
Many of those are led by women.
Vimos también la hipersexualización
So the
por parte de los
intersexualization
medios de comunicación
by the news media
voluptuosas,
try to show
objetos
voluptuous women
sexual.
like sexual objects.
Puedo contar una experiencia
Let
personal.
me
Un día estaba
recount one experience.
esperando
One day I was waiting
para volver a mi casa y se
a
acercó
bus.
una persona preguntándome
A
cuánto
person came.
cobraba, asumiendo que
A person asked
yo era una
how much I charged, thinking that I was, and assuming was that I was a sexual worker, being a black woman. So the notion is that being a black African woman, Argentine, that one doesn't have a college degree, or one is a housekeeper, or nanny. I'd also like to mention in November 15, 2012, the city of Buenos Aires, for the law, promulgated law, the Day of the African Women, and established the Directorate of Afro-American Women. Also, there's also work in a bill that will be presented in Congress that this date will also be developed as the day of lesbian and trans women and with Latin American descent as well as Afro-Latin American. So we also should incorporate into these movements the expressions of gender to press our demands.
Thank you, Mailen. And I like that you pointed out that a lot of the Afro-descendant organizations in Argentina actually have female leadership. And unfortunately, we lost one of our beloved female leaders, right? Your aunt, Pocha Lamadrid. She passed away a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, we have some amazing female leadership. Your aunt as well, right? We love our tias here. Yes, Miriam Gomez is another important female leader among the Cape Verdeans and the Afro-Argentine communities in general in Argentina as well. I did want to ask, now, even though our organization is new, before we even went live or actually formally created the organization, I know that you all were approached with cases, with people needing legal assistance. Could you tell us a little bit about what types of cases or what types of issues, legal issues, do Africans and Afro-descendants in Argentina currently face? So what sorts of situations will OAFRO be assisting with?
Okay. A good question in order to explain that we effectively receive cases from our community. And at the beginning, in 2014, previous to OAFRO, I particularly was approached by the case of two Senegalese ladies from Senegal, Moustafa, who were beaten by the janitor of the building, and they were harassed and they were insulted. You black ladies, go back to Africa, you don't belong to Argentina. And that it also had to do with what Patricia mentioned, that this invisibility process that we suffered. Black people do not belong to Argentina. Black people cannot be part of Argentina. And that also is stated in the national constitution of our country, specifically Article 25, which somehow accepts immigration from all corners of earth. It specifically mentioned that European immigration will be prioritized or will be encouraged, establishing a terrible, differentiation between European immigration and non-European fixing a European supremacy, you know. And these two ladies were approached. I took, oh, okay, those, Sire and Sama, yes. As I mentioned, they were brutally harassed, and we took them to court. I represented them in court.
It was, sorry, just to clarify, it was a physical attack.
It
This
was a physical
person
attack.
came out of the building and beat these women in broad daylight, beat them in the street.
Yes. Police were there, or they were called, they came, let's say, in an acceptable time, but they did nothing at all. As if they, okay, well, it happened, it's something normal. One of the police officers, well, it's normal to have these kind of situations against black people who are selling in the street. So he normalized an abnormal situation. And so also that opened up a topic, which is how to make understand the institutions about discrimination. Even the courts, the judges, the prosecutors do not know even the existence of the laws that somehow protect us. It happened in this case when I say, you must, I myself personally was saying to the prosecutor, you must apply this law, this national law, which is the 23592, which increases the scale of punishment when the crime is committed because of racist bias or prejudice. But the prosecutor did not know the existence of the, say, come here, doctor, let's discuss this law because, sorry, but it's a federal law. So it must apply by the federal courts in the city of, in Argentina. So this it has also to do with the instruction that we also have to do, not only to the community, the legal instruction, but to the institutions. And the court accepted the case. It was elevated to trial, the case, but it was considered, since the janitor had no previous record, criminal record, he went on parole. So, well, parole, yeah, or probation. In Argentina, it's called probation, in which it's an alternative to the prison sentence. So he had to fulfill certain conditions, services, and pay a fine, and he was not condemned. But these situations happened, and in many cases, our community, since is those who belong to the black community, do not have the means, do not have the resources to engage or to hire a private lawyer. So that also is a hindrance, a difficulty for accessing justice, for accessing courts. That's why we somehow try to fulfill that bridge by providing this assistance that is so much needed in the community.
Go ahead.
Sí, también quería agregar que hemos tenido también
That we've also had some
casos
cases,
no voy a nombrar,
persons which haven't named, that received threats at universities to beat them up. Recently, they insulted a person at the university. We try to be there to accompany him, because in Argentina, because everything that's black is related to what is illegal, what is bad. For example, the example of black work, which is, so when they elevate these things to institutions or to the directorships of universities, they think it's not serious, that they're not violating their rights, because insults are normal in the university environment. They normalize it. We also work the company to show society that these things are racist.
Of course, Patricia. You wrote a law. You can add whatever you want.
Okay, no. Además, también algo
in addition,
que me parece importante decir de
something
nuestro
important to say
trabajo
and underscore about our work
reciente,
recently,
somos una organización
because
bastante nueva,
we're an organization,
cada uno de nosotros
although each of us
viene desde hace
has been working for many years, have been advocating different spaces. We should also, important to mention, not only that our organization as an objective intervene in legal cases or before university administrations in racism, but also accompany the community in different spheres of life work, because not only the persons that make up our organization, their life is not only related to racism, they have other questions, like we have many cases of comrades, African, that need counseling for immigration procedures, which will also help, for example, that to present the letter before the immigration authorities, so we help them do that letter. So those are not closely related with judicial, but in other cases, they have nothing to do with racism, because those people in our community, they have other needs. And not all their life has to do with racism, but there are other matters, other problems. As Moustafa has suggested, who's a specialist in immigration procedures, the people use this as a resource for other reasons, not only for racism.
Thank you. So thank you for pointing that out, Patricia, that it's a variety of support. Everything from people who are victims of violent racist attacks to helping people with different forms of paperwork, for migration, for everything. That's wonderful. And thank you for pointing out the cases of physical violence. I think a lot of times when you talk to people about racism in Latin America, especially in Argentina, people will say, oh, no, but, you know, maybe they call people a bad name, but, you know, that's it. It's not like here. There are so many acts of physical violence against black people, and most of them, nobody reports anything, right? But there are plenty of acts of just horrible physical violence against black people, and as our panelists have pointed out, this is all normalized. It's normal for some man to come out of a building and beat two black women in the street. He said that is normal to the police. Would it be normal if they were white women? Probably not, right? How in the world is that normal to do that to anybody, to treat any human like that? But this is the reality that black people face in Argentina. And thank you, Mailen, for pointing out the case about the Haitian student in Santa Fe. There were two other students, their lives were threatened at the university. They left the country. So these were black students who came to Argentina to do their university studies, and their lives were threatened because they were black. Racist threats that said they would kill them if they didn't leave. So they left the country. So it's serious when we're talking about what people are facing. It's not just, oh, some words here or there, or they painted their faces, blackface. Yes, you have that, but you have very serious racial violence that is happening against black bodies right now in Argentina. So the work you all are doing is so important. So that brings me to the next question, because all of you have been, and then we'll open it up to the public. I'm sure you all have questions as well. With us, we have a lot of, we have a good representation of my students from my classes, of course, and we have people affiliated with academia or who have been in college. What are some of the challenges that you all faced as law students in Argentina? I mean, I remember when Madoda said, oh, we're going to make an organization of black lawyers. So I was like, oh, that's great. I know one. And I could not think of anybody else. So I said, I don't know, where are we going to get everybody else from? So we know there's probably not a lot of you, but what are some of the challenges you faced being black students studying law in Argentina in the university?
Well, I can answer that. I'm going to speak in Spanish. I know
English is fine too.
Well, it's harder for me, I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to try. The thing is that being an Afro-Argentinian is really hard because you always feel that you're alone. everywhere, alone in the classroom, I don't know, at the primary school or secondary school, at the university, at work, you're always alone because nobody teaches you that there are some other people that are like you. So that hurts a lot. It's really difficult. And well, that really happens at the law school. The UBA, I don't know if you've heard about the University of Buenos Aires, but it's a really, well, it's public, you don't have to pay anything, just for your books, and there are some scholarships. But the thing is that people don't get to university. Poor people, it's really hard for poor people to get to university. So it's harder if you're black. We know why. And you see less black people with you, and you don't read anything about black people or black authors. They are always white men, white old men, white old rich men. And not only that, but the ones who teach are also white. I don't know if the ones who teach, let's say the ones that have, I don't know how to say it, I'm probably going to invent a word, but it's like the ones that have the subjects. I don't know how to say it, the titularity of the subject, like the
expertise?
No, el titular de cátedra.
The head of the course.
Yes, the head of the subject. Well, they have their name. Lots of women were teaching, and they like white men, women teaching. They are white also, but well, at least they are women. So it's really hard. Well, and things that you don't learn anything about racism. You're in a law school. Nobody makes you read anything about racism. Once I looked for racism in a subject where I wanted to read something, to learn something about racism, and I was taught by a white man that started like saying horrible things, and I was mad at him. It was like, well, I almost prefer all the other white rich men that I knew. Well, the thing is that it's really hard, it's difficult, and some people, I remember a professor asked me where I was from, where are you from, like 5 times in a row. Or in another subject, like 3 or 4 teachers or professors asked me where are you from? And when I complained to the most important white man, he told me that they were asking me that question because I looked as a foreigner. That was the answer. So it's really hard, and that's why with Patricia, I'm sorry, we created a subject that teaches about black history and anti-racism. It was really important for us, and it's one subject in 2,400 subjects that the OBA has.
Yes, that deserves an applause. So they created an elective course for the University of Buenos Aires where they teach anti-racism, really. Isn't that the name of the course, specifically anti-racism? Or
the name is really, really long. I'm going to say
it's about anti-racism.
But yes, I'm going to say it in Spanish. Derecho de las comunidades negras en Argentina desde una perspectiva afro. That's the name. Well, perspectiva afro, it means, well, Afro perspective. The thing is that we are not white rich men. So we see things in a different manner, so that's why perspectiva, Afro perspective is really important.
Awesome. Moustafa, go ahead. Do you want to talk about your experience?
Sí,
Yes.
como desde mi punto de vista,
From my point of view and my case,
estudiar derecho me pareció
studying law
muy importante para
is very important
poder
to be able to
asesorar,
counsel and orient
o mejor también
and defend
argentinas para poder orientar a la comunidad en particular.
the Afro-Argentine community in
Yo
particular.
estudié letras,
I studied
empecé a estudiar sociología,
literature,
arranqué el
but then I
CBC en
started
sociología y terminé
sociology.
cambiando.
And then I
¿Por qué cambié? Y eso
started
creo que es
changing
lo que también me
my
empujó
focus,
a sumarme
and this
a
is what
esa
pushed me
organización.
to join this organization.
Cambié porque
I changed
vivía todos los días,
because I lived every day.
veía todos los días
Oh, I saw every day
situaciones que vivía
situations
la comunidad afro,
that
en
the
particular la comunidad inmigrante, y que
Afro community is
necesitaban una
particularly
solución, y la
the
solución
migrant community
no iba a ser
that
pelearse
needed
directamente
solutions.
con la policía, por ejemplo, el caso de
with
la
the
violencia
example
física
with
en la
police,
calle, sino que
physical
pensé
violence in the
que
street,
la
but also
solución iba a
the
ser
solution
formarse,
to form
entender las leyes y
and
poder
understand
defender o colaborar
the
en la
laws
defensa de estas personas.
and collaborate in the defense of these
También
people,
colaborar en la
and also collaborate
legislación, en que
in
uno
identifying,
pueda participar en la
participate
formación de las leyes a favor de
to
esas
help shape the laws
leyes de
in favor of the community.
la migración, leyes
Laws
en
related to
contra de
migration,
todo lo que es el
lays
racismo,
against
la discriminación, la
racism,
xenofobia,
discrimination, and
pero también
xenophobia,
leyes
but
que
also
pueden el día de
laws
mañana promover
lays in the future
políticas relacionadas con la
promote
población
government policies
la población
related to
migrante.
the immigration population, Afro population. We saw that there were laws, that there were certain rejection in the population among the immigration, among the Africans. They are very alone against several Argentine institutions. For example, those operating under the ley of the immigration law. One could see there were some barriers that would allow or made that the Afro community couldn't obtain certain matter. There's also immigration law with the Decree 70. There were changes. So we should have changes in the law and modify them so that they can be in favor of and be positive.
That's
in
wonderful.
regard to the
That's
African
amazing
immigration
how you
in
were able
particular.
to, just by living and experiencing what it was to be a black man in Argentina, you changed what you wanted to study and you saw an opportunity to then serve your community, right? Awesome, thank you. I do want to open it up. I see we're just about at our hour mark, so I do want to open it up for questions. We have a wonderful live audience, and I know we also have a virtual audience as well, I believe. So they have questions too. Do we want to start here with this audience? Do we have any questions?
We don't have any online.
Oh, no, none online. Okay, they're chilling, watching, they're eating their dinner.
We don't have any questions yet.
Okay, yes. Okay, no problem. Yes. Professor Acosta, yes.
Hola, buenas noches. Voy a hacer la pregunta en
I wanted to,
castellano. ¿Puedo
ask this in
ir
Spanish?
o quieren que la haga en inglés?
por
Ok,
favor.
gracias.
Of course.
Gracias por el
Thank
trabajo
you
que hacen allá.
for all the work that you're doing there,
Gracias por el
and
trabajo
thank you
informándonos a nosotros.
for
La pregunta tiene que
informing.
ver,
I have to
y
do
creo
the
que
question with,
Patricia informó que es
and
una
Patricia addressed it to some
organización en
extent,
construcción,
that
¿verdad?
there's
Pero
a
me
bill
interesa
in
saber
development.
qué apoyo reciben
Get
ustedes,
what
qué apoyo han
help
recibido,
do you
what resources do you
get?
get, and
What
where
resources do you
the
get?
resources?
And where do you
¿De
get the
dónde
resources?
reciben apoyo? Si reciben alguno,
do you get
o dónde piensan
do you
solicitar
get any
para continuar con el
support,
trabajo
or where
que
you
ya
think of getting
empezaron?
support to continue the work that you've begun?
In English, okay. Well, so far as Judith, Patricia, Alí, Mailen, and Moustafa mentioned, we are an organization that initiated in 2020, last year. We are still working in the bylaws, in the constitution of our organization legally, And so we are, though we are not formally created, we are already attending cases, as we mentioned. The attention was given primarily through remote Zoom, not presentially, at least at the moment, until the thing normalizes a bit more. But in focusing specifically to your question, so far we are not receiving any kind of financial support. The idea will be it's all about our efforts, about our resources, about our contacts, and about our time. But we hope that in the future, also this trip has a lot to do with that, to present ourselves formally and see what opportunities of learning the experience of the Black movement in the United States, but also of seeing any kind of links that might be interested in providing us any kind of support. So that is initially our idea. I don't know if my colleagues can add something on that.
No, solo para
I want to add
lo que Madoda ya dijo,
to what was just said.
para nosotros es muy
For us, it's very important,
formalización de la organización ante
the
el
formalization of the
Estado,
organization
tener lo que
before the government,
aquí, personería jurídica,
to have legal
para
status,
poder aplicar a
to be
proyectos.
able to
Nuestra idea
apply
también
ourselves to
no es
projects.
solamente- tenemos
The
muchos-
ideas that we have are
muchos proyectos,
many
muchas
projects,
ideas que esperamos concretar.
many ideas that
Empezamos
we
por formar gente
hope to make a reality,
y poder asesorar a
so we
nuestra
can
comunidad en
counsel our
diferentes
community
situaciones como ya lo hemos
in
expresado,
situations
pero sí la
like we've
formalización legal
addressed.
de
So,
la organización
so we
va
have to
a ser un
create
punto de inflexión
our
para,
legal
creo
status
yo, poder comenzar a
as an
generar
inflection point
proyectos
to
para
generate
recibir
projects,
financiamiento y
to
poder
receive
cosas
financing,
muy básicas como tener un espacio donde
and
recibir a la
and
gente,
organize something very
porque
big,
es
like
cierto que
have a
comenzamos
space
a
which we can receive
funcionar en
people.
la pandemia, y eso nos
So,
obligó,
because we started
obviamente, a estar en
to
nuestras
function during the
casas y tener que
pandemic,
hacer todo por Zoom.
so we had to do
Y
everything
es
by
muy
Zoom,
difícil
and it's very
a
difficult
veces,
sometimes,
sobre todo cuando,
above all,
por ejemplo, tenemos
when we have, for
personas que
example,
consultan que hablan otros idiomas.
so when we have people
Es complicado la
who
pandemia
consult us with a
en
different
general. Entonces,
language,
nuestra idea es poder
so our
contar
idea,
con un espacio propio, poder
have our own
atender
space
a la gente, poder
to be
tener
able
voluntarios que puedan,
to
estudiantes
attend to
de
people,
derecho,
to have
que quieran
students, volunteer law
algún día
students
poder ser
who can become
no sé cómo se
someday
dice, una práctica profesional de que ofrece la propia
to
Universidad de
do
Buenos Aires,
an
la Facultad de
internship
Derecho, para que los estudiantes
so that
puedan
students,
venir a hacer sus prácticas profesionales
they
con
can do
casos
their
de los que
required
nosotros trabajamos.
internship in the field. So we have much ahead of us.
Pequeños pasos, creo que este viaje, que gracias a Judith también ha sido posible.
So this has been possible. So it's possible for us. This is motivating. So be able to return to Argentina, to keep working. So we can be not only the first organization of Afro-descendants of lawyers, we want to do other things. We want to take cases before the judicial system. We want to do changes in the judicial system. We want to make visible cases of racism from the smallest and quotidian to cases that are more strategic. And so you ask whatever citizen, they'll say there's no blacks here and no racism. And the justice and the judicial system is very racism and excludes our
Yes,
communities.
and I would just add, as someone who's been doing research on Black political mobilization for, over 16 years, that all of these are, as you all probably know, activists. They're not getting paid for any of this. This is all time they had to take off. They work in the little bit of time that they have outside of all of their family responsibilities, all the jobs that they get paid to do as well. And they're all, fortunately, part of really great organizations, other great activist organizations as well. So it's about sharing resources too, to do as much as possible. Argentina is a country with very little financial resources for anything, right? So it's really about networking and seeing how we can share and distribute resources as well. But yeah, this trip is an important first step. So if any of you out there in person or virtually are thinking of some connections, that would be wonderful. So please feel free to share that with us as well. Thank you. Great question, though, Professor Acosta. Yeah. Question? Yes, go ahead.
So I know you were talking about. This gets intense. I don't like talking mics. So I know you mentioned one of your cases. Do you have any stories of like one of your most difficult cases? Because I know like you guys are doing laws, creating laws to like help you guys with these situations. But did you ever have to like turn down a case because you couldn't have any like legal support to like fight the fight the case, or yeah, like basically, like, have you ever had a difficult case that you couldn't really follow through with? And if you did, how did you go about it?
Yes.
Sí, ¿cuáles son básicamente los desafíos que tenemos cuando asumimos un caso? ¿Cuál habrá sido el caso más relevante en cuanto a desafíos para llevar adelante?
Y si había uno que
no pudimos agarrar porque era eso para mí la pregunta.
Sí, también. Dos preguntas. ¿Todavía no?
Yes.
Great question, Destiny, another one of my great students.
I think the main challenge that we have is, one of the main challenges is to make understand the institutions, the existence of discrimination and racial prejudice. That, I think, it's a starting point for us, because if we don't instruct those who have to decide the cases, we are lost. So I think that it would be a great challenge, or it's beginning to be a challenge, because they do not know how to deal the cases. Perhaps because of ignorance in some cases, perhaps because of specifically unconsciousness, internal prejudice that they might have. As Ali mentioned, some professors are white and rich, and many judges are also white and rich, most of them. So that is a barrier that we have to bring down bit by bit. And also another challenge also, I think, it's providing what discrimination does mainly is to take off dignity to us, to the people, to the black people. And sometimes the consultants who come to us, we perceive that that they do not have the same rights, that they do not deserve the same recognitions than the white one. So to bring back dignity to the people, I think in our case, by providing legal assistance and instruction, and it's also a challenge for us, I think.
Yes, it's interesting you mentioned dignity. That's been a concept, a theme that's so prevalent in Black political mobilization in the United States as well. You know, we've heard groups like the Black Panthers referring to like restoring dignity to Black people, but so many organizations, Africans and Afro-descendants here, this idea of restoring dignity to these individuals, and how you're able to do that, providing that by protecting their legal rights. Yes, but great question. Yes, Shakima, you have a question as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, because I'm not sure how long this has been.
The mic is coming.
Thank you. My question really is just, I'm not really sure how long this has been happening in Argentina, where the fight is for proper legislation, but has there been any significant change in the past few years in terms of legislation and fighting prejudice and racism in Argentina?
Ali is going to respond.
Well, now in Spanish. You don't speak Spanish? Okay. Well, The only law that we have that mentions us is from 2013. 2013? Yes. Yes. And it only says, well, more or less, the 8th of November, Day of the Afro-Argentine and Afro-Argentine culture. And schools have to put that day on the calendar, and the nation have to do some cultural activities that day, more or less. Sí. That's it. No, sí, obvio. Sí. That's the only national law. I'm sorry. That's the only national law. Now we have the Diseño International. How do you say diseño? Well, the International Decade. Do you know it? That, well, from Durban. And we have a decree in 2017, and Argentina, I'm sorry, Argentina now it's like adds to the decade, and we created a direction in the state, a national direction that it's called International Direction of Migrants and Ethnic Equity.
So it's a new state office in the city?
It's a new state office, like an important state office. The thing is that now they fired the black man that was in charge of that office, and now it doesn't exist anymore. So we had two black people in charge of important offices. One is an ambassador that doesn't do much for us, let's say. I hope that she doesn't listen to
She's
this.
the ambassador to the Vatican?
To the Vatican.
Yes, who's of Cape Verdean descent as well.
Yes, but she's an activist. And the other one was, Carlos Alvarez, that was fired from the place that he had in this office that I was saying. The thing is that now he, with Patricia and Patricia and other people, they created like a program where they work with other offices, really important offices, ministries in Argentina to think public policies for our people. But there is nothing, until now we don't have anything, no. Nothing's changed, and we take like one step ahead, yes. So it's really hard for us, but I really think, and that concerns me and my ego also, that we are going to change this situation in the state. We are going to change it with some people. This generation is really powerful. We are really working, and we are enjoying also an important moment because of the fight that our parents, our uncles, our important people in the world of activism suffered and did. So I think that in the next few years, like 10, 20 years, we're going to change at least some things.
Great question, thank you. Ooh, yes, another student of mine, Julio, has a question.
Do you want me to ask the question in English or Spanish?
Spanish. Look, don't give them the choice. Okay, Spanish.
I'm sorry.
Hola.
Hello.
Damn, I feel like my Spanish is bad.
English, okay.
No, do it. Yo también estoy...
I'm also...
Tengo un interés.
I'm interested in...
Pero no de derechos humanos como ustedes.
I'm not interested in human rights as a vogue. What I want to ask... Have you had cases
de la experiencia
of
del racismo
experience of
con
racism
la conexión de belleza?
and the question of
Persona que es negra,
beauty?
pero también tiene como el privilegio de belleza.
People who are black and who have the privilege of being beautiful is treated differently from a person who's not beautiful.
Like in the entertainment industry, or you just mean
Being
in general?
beautiful helps.
Pretty privileged in how that affects Afro-Argentinians. Porque yo sé que ustedes también tienen como muchos países sudamericanos.
I'm sure, like in many countries in Latin America, the fame of helping the
Right. Well, this is more of the
beauty
industry
catwalks.
Si tuvimos algún caso de
I think
racismo con
more
la
of that is
the
with the
connection of
entertainment
beauty
industry, like you know,
with
people who go,
racism.
like your brother, he's an actor, right? Like, have you seen any discrimination within that if you work in entertainment, acting, modeling, where this idea of beauty appearance is part of the job, basically?
Okay. Nosotros,
We,
aún como organización,
like
no tuvimos
as an
un
organization,
caso
we haven't had a
que tenga
case
que ver que
that has to do with
racismo
the
con los patrones
with-
de belleza, a eso te
with
referís, ¿no? Como
with the
los
relation of
cánones
racism
de belleza
with
que
the
en general son
with the
eurocéntricos.
patterns and models of
En la
Eurocentric
industria,
beauty
bueno, imagino que debe ser
in the entertainment industry.
casi todos lados lo mismo, digo,
And,
ahí,
it's the same thing
siempre la
anywhere, I
belleza
assume.
que se,
The beauty
que se valora positivamente es la
is
belleza
positively valued.
afrodescendiente, eurocéntrica.
The Eurocentric beauty is valued. In Argentina, is something special is happening that has to do with, and this is my personal opinion, with a lack of appreciation and diversity. Above all, not only television, but they put Afro-descendant people
en esto, en publicidades,
in,
para vender algunos
in advertising
productos de belleza.
to sell some beauty products.
Yo no sé hasta qué punto
But I don't know to what point
tiene que ver
that
con
inclusion
una
has to do
verdadera
with a genuine
no sé si esa es la palabra de la diversidad,
accepting,
sino como una cuestión más de
if it's more of a question of
aquí se usa tokenismo, ¿no? De poner una
tokenism,
cara
of putting up
solo
a face
para vender,
only
no
to
sé si
show,
es
to
una
sell.
cuestión más de conciencia, yo no
I don't know if
creo.
it has related with the
En
consciousness
Argentina, en los medios
in
masivos
Argentina,
de comunicación,
in mass media in Argentina, there are hardly any Afro-descendants.
De hecho, hay muchos casos de
And-
blackface en la televisión argentina.
There are blackface, in fact, cases on Argentine television.
Las personas afrodescendientes
And the
que
Afro-descendants
podemos ver en la
that we can
televisión
see on television,
siempre tienen lugares,
they always are,
subalternos,
they
lugares
always have
secundarios,
subaltern
muchas
or
veces en lugares
positions where
¿no? Los varones
are
negros
at the bottom of the
siempre
social scale,
asociados al
always
sexual,
associated
a
to the
las
sexual.
también. Hay
Also,
muchas marcas
there are many brands
que usan al
that use
estereotipo de las mujeres negras como
that use the stereotype of black women of being
no siempre los
hypersexualized.
lugares que estamos
In all
ocupando
places
son
that
los
the place that we
lugares
occupy
estereotípicos,
are
¿no? De
those
la
that are
hipersexualización, los varones
stereotypified.
como buenos deportistas,
The blacks, males as good sportsmen.
sí hemos tenido algunas
We have
denuncias de
had,
blackface, por ejemplo,
we've had some
que
cases
no
of
tiene que ver
blackface.
con tu pregunta, pero
But
tiene
that
que ver
has to do with her
con la
question directly,
representación
but
de
it has
las
to do with the
personas negras y
representation of the
afrodescendientes
black
en los medios
people
de comunicación,
in mass media,
que
and
claramente
that
aún está
and that are clearly
influenciada por
influenced
estereotipos racistas.
by racist
Pero
stereotypes.
un caso particular aún no hemos tenido en la organización.
But we haven't gotten one of those
Great
cases in our organization.
question. Oh, yes, I love it. More questions. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, in terms of like moments in American history or like recently, has there been any turning points in Argentina that has caused like protest or like really big activist events? Like for example, we had George Floyd last year, and prior to that, many others. Has there been any incidents in Argentina or Buenos Aires particularly that has caused like massive bouts of like activism and protests?
Yes. Yeah, I think yes. Yes. Well, let's get to that point. But we are still fighting. We are still fighting to exist. We are still fighting for our visibility. We are still fighting for our recognition and our empowerment. And so that means that in order to recognize those turning points, I think first we must recognize, the state must recognize all our history, how we participated in all the major events in history. And so I think if you compare it to the United States, George Floyd, you have, I mean, a community, a whole community that supported that the people that committed that had to be prosecuted and that had to be incarcerated, and that were against this act of police brutality, not only in the state where that act was committed, but throughout the country. And so that is, I think, is something that shows the empowerment of the people here. We still have to, as Ali say, I think this is a generation that is coming. Even I'm 47, so somehow I'm a bit out of that generation. But the youngsters who are coming, they are coming with a lot of power, they are coming with a lot of empowerment. And I think those are the ones who are going to take into the high skies the George Floyd that might exist in Argentina. And these demonstrations were part of that that acts of brutality that these two Senegalese ladies suffered. So we mobilized the whole community. And it was not sort of a George Floyd protest, but somehow resembled the anger of our community against the authorities, against discrimination, and against racism.
Great question. Yes, Destiny.
So I just kind of wanted to know, like, the thought process of when you guys are creating as you guys are trying to create new laws, do you guys look at like different countries and their laws and how it has helped the Black community to brainstorm the ways that you guys can benefit, or do you guys like look at the laws and try and incorporate it to benefit the Black community? Like, just like what are the processes and the, you know?
Si copiamos otros ejemplos, si tomamos de regiones, de otras regiones, cuestiones que tienen que ver con las leyes, para crear el proceso de creación de leyes, si nosotros tomamos ejemplos de otros lados.
Voy a hablar en español, perdón.
I'll speak in Spanish, excuse me.
No sé si quieres.
I'm going to give you a summary after.
Bueno, sí, nosotros tenemos muy en cuenta
we take very much into account the advances legislative that exist in other countries, in Latin America. For example, the law of Afro-Latin American women was installed internationally. So we took from that, and the same has also happened. It also has happened in other countries where there have been legislative advances with constitutional emphasis with Afro-descendants. We'd like to do the same thing. We're a bit far from to have a constitutional level recognition as has happened in other countries, like in Colombia, in Peru, in Bolivia, where there's been a recognition via the Constitution of different peoples with that concept, with the concept of peoples, which allow to start with collective rights, that there's a legislation, that there's a a very broad legislation in terms of different communities. All the other countries except Brazil have had that have installed days like the Day of Afro-Colombian
o también Bolivia,
or Bolivia. They also have their days of Afro-descendants, and there's one common denominator in general.
Políticas de reconocimiento,
policies of recognition of a law that there is a day of such and such, but there aren't government development policies of those communities, like, for example, Brazil. We're trying, in Argentina, we're trying to build that. We're trying to build that with the National Afro Plan. We're participating in a ministerial discussion group. So, for example, we're trying to have a quota for Afro-descendants in Brazil and in Uruguay. Always the work of social movements of Afro-descendants in other countries in the region are always a model to follow.
Yes, so they're always looking at the other countries in Latin America as models. There are places that have, like Brazil, that have much more advanced laws and plans, national plans for Afro-descendants. I know Peru had Plan DEPA. You mentioned Colombia as well, where that's a very well-recognized population of Afro-descendants too, that they do have legislation in other countries, even commissions, even that really focuses just on Afro-descendants. And a lot of these countries actually have constitutional recognition, meaning in their constitution, the Afro-descendants are recognized as a population, which Argentina does not. If you'll recall, Madoda said Argentina, in its constitution, said it only wanted Europeans. So that's pretty much the opposite of that, right? But the issue is that a lot of the legislation that exists throughout Latin America in regards to Afro-descendants is legislation that focuses on recognition, not on development of any sort, right? It's focusing on just recognition, like, oh, we have a national day for this and that, but it's not how do we change the conditions that these individuals are living in so that we can improve their lives. How do we stop the racism? How do we ensure their basic human rights to housing, to clean water, to education? That's not the legislation that you're seeing. So currently, they're working in Argentina. They're working on a sort of national plan as well for Afro-descendants in Argentina, but actually addressing these issues, going beyond recognition.
Además, es como muy difícil porque también estamos en un país donde
Because we're in a country where we have a law that recognizes that there's a African population, but it's insert, but at the same time, the question is where we came. For example, my aunt was stopped in the airport that she had a fake passport because she couldn't be Argentine. So we're fighting all the time so that we're recognizing that there's Afro-Argentine population.
There's an ongoing fight just to recognize that Afro-Argentines exist, period. Her aunt, who I mentioned, Moustafa Lamadrid, who recently passed away, that was a very well-publicized case in the paper where she was stopped in the airport and they said she had a fake passport because she couldn't be black in Argentina. So this is kind of, so they're still trying to get past that point, right? So imagine trying to create a national plan against all of these different types of challenges. Oh yes, another one of my students, Khadijah, you have a question, yes. It should be on, yes, go ahead.
Okay, hey guys. So I know you guys said that there's a lot of people in power that don't acknowledge Afro-Argentines. So I know you guys also say you created a course. So what was that fight like? Because technically you're creating something that's going to mobilize a whole bunch of people to fight for Afro-Argentines. So what was that fight like to get that one course?
Well, it's really hard to answer that, to be fair in that answer, in fact. Because for us, it wasn't really, really hard. We got to, there was like an event like this one, for example, really similar. The Investigation Institute of the Law School of the UVA was like celebrating an event where they were going to speak about Afro-descendants in Argentina, or Afro-Argentinian people. The thing was that the only person who was going to speak about it was the president of the institute, and he is a white rich man. So we heard of it with Patricia, with I'm in the mood, in English mood. And we went there just to kind of protest. The thing is that it was a really nice white rich man that told us that he was interested in doing things or giving us his support for us to do things to change the law school. And one of the things that we wanted to do, one of the things, was this course. And we were going to start kind of fast. Well, something happened in 2020. I don't know if you know about it, but COVID and the pandemic. Maybe it was in Argentina, I don't know. And well, we started this year in March, and it was really, really successful. Really, really, really successful. We had like, I don't know, like 50 students. Yes, and it's an optional course. It's like really in the margins, let's say. And well, like 150 people that from outside of the university told us that they wanted to take the course. People from other countries. It was crazy. We did like 1,000. ¿Cómo se dice notas? Notas. Periodísticas. Well, lots of journalists called us, and we were, I don't know, in the Guardian. The other day we went, my face was in Germany in a newspaper. Like lots of articles. I don't know, like 30? Yes, lots of articles. No money, but lots of articles. Because the university doesn't pay us. They don't pay us. Yes, and it's hard work. I'm going to say, to be fair with my partners, that Moustafa and Madoda are also there as part of the teachers, but we are the bosses. And well, to be fair also, I want to say that this is a product of years and years and years of activism of people that is not with us now, and people that is with us now also. So it was really hard, but not in terms of fighting against the university. No, we want to make a protest. No, it was like easier, that part. But, well, I want to say that it's really hard. It's hard work. Being black and teaching anti-racism is really hard, because you have to think about really painful things and reread things, and you studying for your classes, you find more painful things, and you say, "Oh, I didn't know that hurt." Well, it's really hard. But well, a lot of people, white people, told us that they are incorporating the perspective in their, I don't know, in other classes that they give in other schools, or investigation projects, or including, the other day, a friend of mine told me that a partner of her was discussing with her teacher with her professor because he was saying a racist word, and she learned that in our class. So we are making a little change, and it's nice.
That's amazing. Oh, yes. A question from the other side of the room. Yes. Go ahead.
Sí, voy a hablar en español.
I'll speak in Spanish.
Mi primera pregunta son
My
dos
first question.
rapiditas, pero una tenía algo
I
que
have two
ver con
questions,
esto
but the first that you asked about the genders. What sort of research that you research the gender question in these cases to give more visibility? On the other hand, what importance or presence do you have in the cultural sphere? Because I understand, for example, you referred to dance. If you could elaborate a bit, because I think that culture is an ally in this process of giving visibility and in fighting indiscrimination, ethnic, and in favor of the Afro identity. And many thanks. I'm going to start with the second question that's related cultural sphere. It's true, as was being explained here, our organization is comprised of different people from different sectors and organizations. For example, in my case, from the Senegalese group, in which we work very much on the cultural aspect. How do we work this? We also, for example, we're trying to spread knowledge of our religion, of our fusion, cultural fusion of dance. Are there teachers, Argentines, the dance, the meaning of the dance, because dance is not just entertainment, because it has a greater significance and expresses something broader. So it's a moment to try to integrate that into Argentina. So not everything is going against the law or working on the law. It's also trying to teach who we are to the other people, who we are by means of culture. But so in that way, maybe there can be a cultural blending so that there's a broader support for cases more specific of racism. So that has to do, is a fundamental part of the law against racism. Because many people discriminate because people are not conscious of, because they don't want to see or they don't want to see us. So this association of Senegalese with other organizations from the areas that can provide cultural contributions, and with that help that people familiarize themselves much more in Argentina with the our cultural representations because of the contribution, because of a way to contribute to Argentina. So it has to do with a broader effort that goes beyond just looking at the migratory phenomenon in narrow terms. So that's what we're trying to form this with. For example, what here asked about getting resources, because here in New York, we're visiting institutions, we're learning how they were formed, and they didn't forget about different parts. It's true, we have to think about legal aspects and defending people, but we also think about orientation and educational, but not leave behind the culture. So it all is something that can be conjoined. So one feeds into the other. So we can't think we're defending legally people without working on other aspects. And this is very important, and we're working on that so that the integration of the Afro-descendants.
Exactamente. Respecto a los medios.
Regarding the media. But I want to underscore in this relationship. For example, in the case of the law school on the special course, many people wrote special articles, but the way mass media approaches discrimination makes it very difficult to combat it. All of what happens on the street and the police, the mass media run to cover because they want to demonstrate that. How could I say it? How this is affecting how it's affecting the dignity of the Argentines, because they cover when the police beat up blacks in the street. It's also not only physical violence, but it's also psychological violence. It's a way to discriminate, but it's a way to show that these are foreigners. They're not part of our society. They're blacks, and we can do whatever we want with them. And that is that against the dignity of the human being. And all those discriminate, all those are racist, that harm the dignity of human being. So the mass media, when they publish, they talk about how blacks have been beaten, not to defend the blacks, but they give the impression that the blacks are beaten because they behaved a certain way. A specific case in mass media, when they want to give the side of the policy to show that the police are doing the correct thing because what the blacks are doing. In this case, in 2008, to speak second community, they invited a politician called Biondini, who is neo-Nazi. He is a neo-Nazi party. They invited him on television, and they invited him on television to speak about the immigration from Africa. How many researchers exist in Argentina? How many professionals exist in Argentina? So that a news organization invite a politician that doesn't know, nor has any input to understand English, to speak about that community. So he spoke of slavery, relation with the Chinese community. So he tried to mix the community, Senegalese community, with trafficking. And a few days later, some other dailies published almost the same thing. The Senegalese, 5 Senegalese were enslaved by Chinese foreigners at a construction site of a supermarket in an area of Buenos Aires. How they relate that information. So 8 newspapers published that, and it was all false. That has a lot to do with what discrimination and fuels discrimination. So maybe one could tolerate in the community because maybe some people don't understand the need to show government policies in education regarding the Afro population. And so maybe this, what I've just described, can be understood because there was no education in school about the Afro community. So it's a particular compass. So what we want to do is provide more information.
Thank you so much, Moustafa. Thank you for pointing out the role of the media in spreading falsehoods and lies. He was talking about an event that was on Senegalese, and the organizers, instead of inviting one of the many researchers that researches African immigrants in Argentina, they invited a well-known neo-Nazi politician to speak about the Senegalese, and the lies that that neo-Nazi said were then circulated in 8 other newspapers by the next day. Yes, so the media plays an important role in helping foment racism and helping circulate racist ideas and misinformation as well. So we cannot ignore that. That's part of, and I think you see some of the activism here, that's part of what people are fighting against as well. And thank you for asking the question related to the different cultural productions. We have some amazing organizations in Argentina led by Africans and Afro-descendants for music, religion, for so many cultural productions. I think the issue has always been that that is what is the focus and not the legal part. There was not legal recognition, so that has always been the focus, and that's a great way to draw in interest, especially people who don't identify that way, but that is not enough. You have to go beyond playing drums, beyond these wonderful cultural productions. There is a whole battle to fight when you have people being beaten down in the broad daylight and nobody thinks that's a problem, right? That it's fine because they're black. So we have to move to focusing on beyond recognition and actually looking at legal rights and changing the education system and making these other really substantive changes that will be long-term and affect the lives of Africans and Afro-descendants for generations moving forward as well. But yes, we are running out of time. Yes, we have one more question, it's okay? Yes. One more question, Julio. No, we have, very quickly, go ahead.
Isn't that part of the ratchet rhetoric to invite somebody who is going to be that type of person
strategic.
To
yes,
deflect?
Of course. They're not really interested in the actual issue. They just wanted attention. Yes, absolutely.
So what do they do to combat that in the media? Do they go to the media and say, we know that you're doing this intentionally to deflect and then undermine the African migration and population in Argentina? Because, a neo-Nazi, who really is going to argue with a neo-Nazi?
¿Cómo reaccionaron? Sí, a todo eso. ¿Cómo reaccionaron a estas cosas?
Mira,
well, look, it's very difficult because one has to be well prepared for this, but also try to have the conscience of what image, what people have as an image of the Senegalese community in particular and African in general. And first place when all that happened, the interview of Nathan, the repercussion in the news media. So what we did, so we went so we wanted to refer to what the legal aspect was. So we went to the police station where there had been Senegalese that they had been detained. Then we went to immigration, where supposedly immigration identified the Senegalese who had been placed by the Chinese. So then that wasn't true. So we sent we contacted news media to say all that information was false. But unfortunately, we're not organized. But we didn't organize a march or public rejection to the mass media, but we did it in 2012, for example.
Thank you, Moustafa. And we have one last question from my friend Marcelo, finally in Argentina, asking a question. We're very excited.
Okay. Corta la pregunta. Nada, quiero felicitar por el trabajo que están
First, I want to
haciendo y
congratulate
veo
you
que
for
la
this
energía
great
que tienen
presentation and the energy that you've been able to dedicate to this.
seguir adelante con
So
el proyecto.
to go ahead with your project.
Una pregunta más estadística. Al principio hablaron de que en el censo
At the start, in the census,
o algo, ¿qué número arrojó?
about the census figures. So is there anything we can do for the next census to really determine how many people are Afro-descendants so that numbers can speak? For so many years. So they tried to conceal for many years the Afro population. So statistics really affect reality. So, and also what can you do so people can participate in the census? So the representation is seen.
Sí, en el año 2010
So in 2010, so they included,
de casi 130 años, una pregunta
after 130 years, a question, so referred to the self-identification of the persons. So the person would be filling out if they identify themselves as Afro-descendant or they had an African ancestor. Unfortunately, in spite of all this, which was an achievement to include that question, it was only included in the lengthier version of the form. So the census in Argentina, so 90% of the population, so and 10% get another form. So that's more like a sampling. So that question about Afro identification was only applied to 10% of the population. It was an achievement. So 150,000 persons. So 150,000 persons who identified. So we take the 150,000. So officially it was 150,000 in the census itself from the shorter form. So what we're trying to do for the 2020, the year that comes, the National Statistical Institute has a commitment in the census so that this question of Afro-identification is included in all surveys. Is another question is to make the population much more aware of our population. Not only the question of the lack of visibility among the government, like the aunt of your Pocha Madrid. It's not only the question of skin color, it's a question of ancestry. Some Afro-descendants don't really fit the stereotype of color. So we're trying to do a strong campaign to raise consciousness on this. So the question of raising consciousness, there was that sample, 10% of the population.
Is Brazil. They had like 20% of black population, and with the governments of Dilma and Lula, more or less in 14 years, they now have 52% of the population that is Afro-descendant. What did they do? Well, they recognized rights to the black people, and that empowered public. That made people want that they wanted to be black now, and so they started looking at the mirrors or asking to their parents, or it's like that, because when I ask in Argentina to my coworkers, for example, why is your skin dark? I don't know. And they look at me, why are you asking? I don't know. and so I start asking them about their family. Well, and now they are all black. We are all black. It's an example. More or less, it's like that. We have lots of black people that don't know that are at least Afro-descendant people that don't know that they are Afro-descendant people. So we have to acknowledge them or give them rights. That's what we have to do, and that's why we are activists. We want people to have, we want black people, people to have rights, and we want specifically black people to have rights.
Yes, thank you. We have to stop there. Just a couple of things before we wrap up. We definitely want to say a big thank you to the People's Forum. Oh, thank you for this amazing space and all of your hard work. Yes, to make our first official public event in person as OAFRO possible. We really appreciate it. I've worked very closely with David, who's back there in the booth, and with Claudia as well, who helped us organize. And of course, a big shout out and thank you to our wonderful translator. We worked really hard today. Walker. It's amazing as well. And thank you to Andreana at the Graduate Center and Clackle, Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies as well. And of course, thank you to all our amazing panelists coming here from Argentina representing OAFRO. We're so proud of the work you do, and we're definitely here to support you, and we look forward to seeing what amazing changes you bring for Argentina and for Afro-descendants in the region. So, and thank you all for being such a great audience today, a great live audience. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you.